Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Always Making. I'm Christy.
I'm Derek.
And we are joined today by Sara of Charmed Mountain. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Sara of Charmed Mountain.
Excellent. Why don't you tell us what Charmed Mountain is?
So Charmed Mountain is a magical soap company. So one of the projects that I have is to make soap. It's a small business that I do out of my home. And I've been in business for about 5 years now. And that is how we first met.
Yes, it is.
At Craft Lake City last year.
That's right.
Yeah, and we just got done with this past weekend. We're 2 days after doing Craft Lake City. I mean, I'm surprised we're all not asleep right now.
I know.
Right? How are your feet?
Yeah.
Mine are always sore for days.
I put new insoles in right before the show, so I had some comfort on my feet for the show, for sure.
Yeah, and I made sure that we had comfortable chairs this year so I could take many, many breaks and sit down and get off my feet for that very reason, because last year my feet were very sore. Yes, so we met at Craft Lake City last year, and then you and I also met through a local sort of maker meetup group.
Which was so fun. That was, what,
Right?
3 months ago now?
I don't even know. Time
Yeah.
flies, but it was so fun to see a familiar face and go, hey, I know you.
And I didn't know that you did like textile crafty things. So
Exactly.
it's fun to make that connection
Same. Yeah. So before we get into all of the things that you do, because like us, you also do many things, why don't you tell us how you got into soap making?
too. Well, I got into soap making because I wanted to create a small business that I could do out of my home. That was something I could build over many, many years and hopefully retire into once I'm all done like corporate working. And I had done a small business a couple years previously where I was making baby quilts,
Okay.
which was super fun and creative, but it was not profitable. So I learned a ton from that and then decided in my next business, I had just like a list of things I wanted that business to be to make it easier and more profitable. So that's how I stumbled upon soap making. I had never made it before.
Really?
And I just like listed all of these different businesses. I thought, oh, this could be a good opportunity. And
So
I
you had
tried
never
it.
made soap
I'd
before?
never made soap
Wow.
before. Made soap, experimented a bunch, and then like a year later started the business.
Awesome.
I do want to know, was last year your first Craft Lake City, or have you been doing
No.
it a few times before that?
2020 was my first
Okay.
Craft Lake City,
Okay.
the online
Was
one.
that was there? Yeah, okay, there's a virtual one that they did.
Yeah. But then, so this was my fourth one.
Okay, very cool.
Awesome.
How has your experience, like, as you've been doing more shows, gotten like easier for you? Gotten like more difficult? More adding more like details to everything? How's that been for you?
It's been so much easier because all of that experience and everything I learn, I usually take the last week after a big show like this one just to say what sold, what didn't sell, can I imagine why it didn't sell, do I need to keep that product, should I change that product in the future? So I do a lot of analysis afterwards to see how I'm going to improve for next time. Last year, I was next to I squared.
I squared, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And Isaac. And so he and I, whenever it was slow, we would chat business back and forth, which was really great. And so just made me think about some of the products differently.
Yeah, he's been doing it. I think this was his 14th year of doing Craft Lake City. Yeah. And if you
And
guys
that's
aren't
primarily
familiar,
what he does is shows.
yeah,
so.
it's primarily what he does
Yeah.
at shows. And so if you guys aren't familiar with I Squared, he's local to Utah. Go ahead and
I think
check
it's
him out.
IH squared.
Well,
is
IH
his,
squared,
is
yeah.
his Instagram handle.
And so, but definitely check out his art is very cool and a very cool guy.
Yes,
and everything.
yeah.
We met him last year as well because he was right across from us.
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
show.
So in those slow moments when you're sitting in your booth, all you can do is look across at the booths across from you and go, "Ooh, what are they at? What are they doing?"
Yes. Well, and what are their sales techniques? Because I think that's such a huge part of a show like this is what sales technique do you have to get people to stop, to come into your booth, to check out your product. Because otherwise they're just going to walk on by.
That's true, and I think that's something we definitely learned at our first big show, Craft Lake City, last year as well, is seeing, okay, what is catching people's eye, or what is it that, is pulling people in. Okay, so we've touched a little bit on the soap making. What else do you do? Or what else have you done? What is your creative journey? Where have you been?
Well, I mean, my creative journey started as a kid because I was in music. And so I played cello for decades. That was my undergraduate degree. I was going to go to grad school in music because that was my goal. So music for a really long time. I've been quilting for, probably like 30 years now, which makes me sound pretty old. But yeah, so I, started sewing as a kid, been quilting because my mom's best friend taught me when I was in my teens. So that's pretty much been a constant of something that I've done creatively for a long time. And then lately, I've gotten a lot more into textile art. And so making more art through quilting, through other textiles. So that's been a different creative outlet as well.
I would say we've seen some of your stuff on social media. It's is it safe to say like an abstract type of textile? Is that the best way to kind of describe that?
Yeah, no. I mean, I love artists that can do very literal with thread and fabric, but I like a very bold, graphic, geometric perspective. Because, I mean, that's one of the things that quilting is great at, but just trying to give it a different flair. Yeah.
Where does the inspiration for that stuff come from?
Oh, that's a good one. Right now I'm working on a series of 10, maybe 12 small art quilts. And last year I followed this science journal, and they had this whole long series of super sensational headlines, like taking science, but just turn it into super science fiction for some reason. And so every time one of those headlines would come up, I would just like write it down in a notebook. And so now I've got a list of 30 of them. So I'm just selecting a bunch of them to turn into a quilt. So it's taking like science fact that should be kind of placid, maybe boring, turning it into science fiction, and then my brain taking it into a fantasy. What could this really be through art?
Oh, that's awesome.
That's
great.
amazing.
That's a great way to find that inspiration for that. Yeah, it's always, we talk to so many artists and so many creative makers and stuff, and trying to just hear where their inspiration comes from and stuff. Even before the camera started rolling, hearing about what your husband does as well. It's like, oh, we have all these connections about how we find these inspirations in creative. It's so cool. Like that we get to talk and express that with each other and like share each other's passions with that.
It's fun to geek out with artists.
Yes, absolutely. So do you draw inspiration from similar places for your soaps? Or is that completely different?
It's completely different.
Okay.
Just because soap making, since I am trying to sell it, it's a different creative process than making an art quilt.
Right.
Yeah.
So what goes into, how do you decide what, scents, what's ingredients to add to your soaps?
Most of my soap is based on magic, so either the phases of the moon or folk ingredients, traditional magic ingredients, right now the zodiac. And so, I mean, over the centuries, so many things get associated with that idea or that sign. And so what I've been doing is taking those different associations and seeing how I can put them together in something that looks pretty and smells good
Right.
to represent that.
Yes. So I'm very curious then, because I know, I think it was this past winter, maybe it was last year, you had done something with freshly fallen snow. And I was like
Yes.
fascinated. Like, how did you come up with that? How do you incorporate that into soap?
Well, I mean, in that case, that was snowdrop soap.
Okay.
And so there's just the traditional winter festival, February 1st, which is still a winter holiday. And so some of us know it as Groundhog Day. It's like, oh, are we going to have more winter or is it going to be spring? And so one of the ingredients that I thought, oh, how do I show that it's still winter, that it's still a winter holiday? I should just get some snow and incorporate that magically into the soap. Yeah. So when I knew it was going to snow, and it was a few weeks before, I could leave a little bowl out to capture snow when it fell and then get it in the soap.
That's so awesome. Do you pull any other ingredients from, like, that was your backyard? So from your backyard or from, local resources?
A lot of them have different herbs. And so I will, for like dandelion soap, I would plant dandelions, harvest them, and then infuse them in the oil. So there's a lot of them that I do infuse in oil or infuse in water for like a tea to then incorporate into the soap. And so, yeah, some of it comes from my backyard.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
You're growing your own
being
ingredients.
resourceful around you is great. With your process for preparing for a show with your soaps, is it like a few months process of making the soaps, or is it like maybe just like that, like 2 weeks leading up to the show, you have your ingredients and kind of make everything? How far out are you when leading up to a big show like Craft Lake City?
For something like Craft Lake City, I'm super far out because a batch of soap needs 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh, really?
to cure.
Okay.
Just for it to be really nice on your skin. I mean, you could sell it, but it's just you're gonna have like 3 bars and it's gonna dissolve into mush. So you gotta let it crystallize and cure and just really have a nice long time. So, I mean, I unveiled the Zodiac soap just earlier this summer, but that series of 12 soaps I started making back in January, just so that I would have enough time and enough product to be ready for Craft Lake City.
What's
Wow.
your testing process like for you to like see if that like ingredient's gonna work or
Oh
that?
my gosh. And see, that could be easily another 6 months.
Yeah, your R&D side of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can be really extensive because you don't know how a fragrance is going to discolor. Like sometimes they stay a nice white, so I can add different color to make it pretty. If it's got like vanilla or sweet tones in it, it's going to turn brown. So I have to accommodate
Interesting.
for that. Some, like I have this one fragrance that turns a little bit purple once it's in soap. I don't know why.
Interesting.
So yeah, so experimenting with that is an easily so Zodiac soap that I launched at the beginning of the summer, I started thinking about in January of 2022
Okay.
of what am I going to do? What's my inspiration? What ingredients am I trying to go with? And then sourcing fragrance, sourcing all of that to develop it.
So about a year and a half of R&D and process before it actually was like comfortable with
On the shelf to sell.
to
Yeah,
sell. Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't realize the soap like process was so like involved in that sense. Like I know there is the different, but like I didn't realize it took 4 to 6 weeks for like a soap to like fully develop.
Yeah.
And is it just so that it can fully harden or solidify?
Okay, so chemically, what
Right.
happens is part of it is for it to be nice and hard, for it to be a good bar, just the water takes that long to evaporate.
Right.
But also when you are making soap, there is just the chemical structure of it. It takes a while for all of the molecules to form into soap so that it's going to be nice on your skin
Okay.
and it's going to actually lather. So,
Interesting.
yeah,
That's very
it's fun
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's chemistry
Yes.
and it's creativity. So that's why I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
how we kind of like you kind of threw yourself out there with all the different ideas of what a next business was going to be. Why did you land on soap? Like, was it just the
Aside from ticking all those boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like some of the boxes, so I made baby quilts, which were machine quilted, but they took a lot of hours. I mean,
Yes.
it's, 3 hours to make a quilt because I was making them super simple. And people usually only buy one baby quilt if you are buying a $150
Yeah.
item to gift or to have as an heirloom. So I really wanted to make a consumable product. Just because it's like, if you have something that you have to buy at least once a year or once a month, I mean, as
opposed to a one and done kind of purchase.
you're going to be able to build a better audience for what you're making. So that was a big part of it. But also I still wanted something that had some creativity along with being a business to run.
Right, right. So you said your kind of long-term goal is to be able to do this in retirement. Have you ever wanted to sort of leave that corporate world full-time before you reach retirement and go full-time with art, or no?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I enjoy it. It's such a different skill set and different experience. I like having it all.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think that's such a great perspective because there is sort of this push, I think, a lot of times to commodify your hobby, I think is like kind of the buzzwords that are being thrown around right now. But that idea of like, oh, well, if you're so good at making this, you should sell it and then you should go full time and that should be your, your life. Because I think it is kind of like this idea of being a dream, but it's not everyone's dream. And I think that's totally fine. So I love
I agree.
that.
I find it interesting because like every time, because we both sew. So anytime I make a pair of pants, somebody's like, oh, I love them. Will you do commissions? I'm like, no. If you want them, I will charge you $800 for this pair of pants.
Which is fair.
Which is fair. Probably a little expensive. But because I don't want to commodify that. I want to be able to make a pair of pants and enjoy them, or make a jacket for a friend or those sorts of things as a gift and as a gesture.
And as something that you enjoy and not a job.
Correct.
I mean, Vera Wang dresses go for a lot, and I mean, you could sew up. I mean, that stuff, and like people pay $800 for pants, so
That
it's
is
not.
true.
It's not out of the realm of
But not so
possibility.
much for me.
That's fair. How many shows do you do a year with the soap? Is it just Craft Lake City, or is it?
That is the only in-person show I do.
Oh, okay.
Just because, I mean, it takes, it takes a
Yeah.
lot of time and work. I got to take time off from work to be able to do it. But I do a lot of pop-up markets throughout Salt Lake. I
Okay.
probably do
Are you weekly, monthly, like
definitely monthly. I'd say probably 10
for the year?
for the year.
Okay, just to kind of put yourself out there, get started, because
Yeah.
like we're talking here, and you're still doing your full-time job. This is still something you're building up to down the line with that. So, what was that like? I guess that next step for you, because we've talked to other people, and there's like that hesitation to put yourself out there. What was that like final like step for you to say, okay, I'm gonna put myself out there with soap and see how it does?
Oh, I just knew from the beginning that I was going to do it because I started planning it to be a business.
Okay.
That's
Not
right.
like, I have this cool thing. Oh, my friends like it. My mom pays $5 for it. I could probably sell it. No, since I started out going, I want to make a business out of this, from the beginning, I knew my bottom line and I knew my cost so that I could make money from it.
Yeah. So yeah, and so
Well,
that's-
because you had the experience with the baby quilt business as
Yes.
well.
and
Right.
so hands-on wise, what's the most satisfying thing about like your final product with your soap?
Yeah, what do you love the most about it?
Oh, soap or soap making or doing shows?
Just about your like in general about your final product. Like what's the most gratifying
Oh
thing?
my
from
God,
that?
I just love it because it smells good.
Yeah.
And when you are showering with something, especially that you made, that smells good, that you know is good for your skin, it's like, oh, I made such a good choice doing this. I'm doing great things for my skin, but I'm also just having fun. So that's gratifying.
That's the gratifying
Yeah.
side, and just being able to know that product that you make, you know the ingredients, you know that final
Yes.
result, and it's like, oh yeah, I did this. That's cool. That's great
Yeah.
to hear. One of the things we love talking about on this show is the tools that as makers we use to like create what we create. And so with quilting for as long as you have, the first question I have is, do you still have your first sewing machine?
Oh my gosh, I do.
Most sewers really cherish that first sewing. So I had to ask that.
This is such a funny story. I was probably 14 or 15, and there was a present under the Christmas tree from my grandmother. And based on the weight and the size,
You knew.
I knew it was a stereo.
Oh,
Because, I mean, gosh, so this is like 1990, 91. I wanted a boombox. So I was convinced it was a stereo, and I unwrapped it, and it was a sewing machine. And it is this heavy-ass Singer sewing machine from the 50s. And I was so disappointed.
Oh no.
I was so sad. But yes, I love that sewing machine. I still have it.
I'm
Yeah.
sure your grandma would love to hear that.
and do you still use it, or is it now just kind of the pieces that kind of sits on the wall? And,
No, I still use it. I mean, I need to take it in for service because
Yeah.
it's skipping a couple stitches, but yeah,
it's still something that does get used. It's one of those tools.
Oh, it's
yeah.
beautiful because it's made out of metal, so it doesn't
Yep.
break. And oh yeah,
Yep.
it's just
Yeah.
a joy.
I think for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I have a vintage antique, actually, Singer. I don't think yours was quite that old, but that was a barn find. Actually, my best friend's mother-in-law had it in her barn, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And she was like, here, you can have it, and just pulled it off the shelf and gave it to me. So I was like, wait, are you sure? I feel like I'm
I love
stealing
that
it.
because there's so many, at least with sewing and quilting, there's so many ancient items
Yeah.
that are still out there. Like I have this big wooden quilting frame that I got from a woman who used it, at her church for decades
Yeah.
to tie quilts. I'm like, I have this quilting frame with this huge heritage.
Yes.
It's just a joy.
Well, it's the same way for me with cameras. I bought 2 new cameras over the weekend at Craft Lake City. One of the vintage
course.
sellers had some cameras, but like I shared one with my friend, and I'm like, yeah, this is like 1960 to 1970 is when this camera was created. He goes, no way, it still works. I'm like, yeah, there's film in it. I'm snapping photos, and that's like great, because reality is that's a long time that people have been using that camera, capturing moments. I don't know what those pictures look like, but like I know I'm going to continue using that tool to capture moments for myself. And like sewing machines, same thing. There's a variety of them. We see them all the time at thrift stores, at antique stores, and they still work for the most part. And like, or a little bit of tweaking and they'll get them back up and running, and you can still make beautiful pieces of art off of them, which is great. The soap making side of things, I know it's a little bit more business for you with that, but is there a tool in that like regard that like makes your life easier as a soap maker?
I'd say that, I mean, I'm mixing it in just big buckets, so that doesn't matter. But scaling up to a bigger capacity, I got like this really big wooden mold. So that's what I pour the soap in so that I can make 40 or 70 bars at a time. And so switching up to, instead of making 4 batches of soap to make 40 bars, now I make 1 batch of soap to make 40 bars. Some of those tools to be able to scale properly, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
Like, suddenly I've got hours of my life back because I can just use this.
Yeah, and so for somebody looking to get into the soap like business in that sense, would that be the kind of tip for them to kind of like little hint or stuff is like maybe get yourself, instead of investing in smaller molds right off the bat, invest into something bigger that's going to have that larger return for you?
I think that with any business, if you do plan to grow over time, finding the ways early on where you can scale up, it's going to save you so much time, as long as you can make that initial investment.
Yeah. What was your first investment into like your soap making?
Ooh. I'd say being able to buy like a whole 10-pound bucket of oil at a time. Because I mean, if you're making, like my original recipe made 13 bars at a time. And so that would be, like 4 or 5 pounds of soap that I was making.
And so for process-wise, just so I understand a little bit, when you make those 13 bars, do you have to let it sit in that mold for 4 to 6 weeks?
No. I let it sit in that mold for like a day or two, and then you take it out and cut it, and then you just have to store it.
So it on a daily, you could only make those 13 bars.
Yes.
And then make another batch the next day and the next day. So like if you were trying to do a show...
And I wanted to make 40, it would take me the entire week to make soap, let it cure, cut it. Make soap, let it cure, cut it.
And so
and that would just be one run of soap.
That would just be one
multiple. Different.
So when you can
flavors.
suddenly do that all in one night.
And then you can break that mold up, and like there's 40 bars in that one mold. You can make another 40 bars. Yeah, it's just it's worth the investment if that's something you guys are looking to like get into. And it's a great tip of like, hey, make that investment into like your capability of upscaling your business right off the bat, if that's where you're going, kind of thing. Because for hobby people that if they're not looking at it as a business side, 13 bars is a lot.
That's a year's worth of soap.
But like if you're looking to make it that business side of thing, you will run that mold very quickly. Or you're investing in multiple molds to just and go through the motions that way. So
So that makes me wonder, when you're testing out new like recipes, let's say, obviously you're not going to want to make 40 bars of a test recipe, but does it scale up the same? Like, are you able to test in small batches and then apply that just to a larger batch, multiple recipe?
It usually scales exactly the same. 99% of the time.
I was just going to ask, what's the crazy outlier that has happened to you of like with the like, oh, hey, I tried this and then I changed this amount, and all of a sudden it's like it's purple or something.
No, I mean since it's chemistry, so many variables that if you add a little bit too much of this,
it can have a completely different effect.
It could burn your skin. So I mean when you're doing chemistry, that's that's a concern. So don't want to err on that side of things.
Now I'm like, how do we test this soap on your skin? And then all of a sudden,
have you had any like really adverse reactions to any of like the recipes that you've tested?
No.
Okay.
No, once it's to the point where I'm actually making a batch of soap, I'm pretty sure that everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might set up really quickly, or it might change color a little bit, but it's not going to be dangerous.
So not unsafe. Okay.
For the makers out there that are looking to make it a business, what's that like helpful advice that you might have for them to kind of get started or push them to that next step?
Oh, I would say it's analytical and it's focusing on numbers, because I'm just a geek like that. It's really figuring out not only what is it costing me to make this in terms of ingredients and supplies, but what is my time costing me? What is that minimum cost for one viable product so that I can then say, oh, how much am I going to price it for?
Yeah.
What if I have a store locally that wants to buy 100? Can I make that many? What's their cost? How much money? So that I'm still making money. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the conversation we have constantly, me and Christy, because Christy, on the get-go of a lot of stuff, it's like, oh, I just spent 12 hours sewing this piece, and I'm like, oh, $20. Whoa, why? No, we have to, we have to
if
really
it took me
adjust
12
it.
hours, I'm not going to charge 20.
but,
I'm not
like,
that bad.
it
But
is-
it is hard to figure out how to price your stuff
But
sometimes.
it is very hard to figure out that price of your item, and so it is the scalability
Yeah.
and the like what your time is worth
Yeah.
to you
Working a full-time
with that
job
stuff,
and doing
and
this business on the
that doesn't
side.
always
So
translate
how
to
do you
what people
manage your time?
think
How do
your
you
time
juggle
is
all of
worth to
this
them
as
as well, and that's always a hard discussion. And sometimes we've met people who
I'll be
hand
honest,
draw
I
all
don't
their
watch
t-shirts,
TV.
and I have a screen printer, so like I can do
So,
on my system
I
about,
feel like
50 shirts an hour,
strategically,
roughly,
there's a
like, and
lot
just
of
at a
little
nice pace. And that's
hour
a huge
bursts of
return
free
if I'm
time
selling those shirts
that
at
I
20 bucks a
choose
pop.
to have as
Somebody's
creative time.
hand drawing a T-shirt for 6 hours, and
But
they're
I
selling
think
them for
that
the same
that's
price.
been
I'm like,
modeled
dude,
to me
losing
by a
money.
lot of other people.
yeah,
Like,
that doesn't
I
work.
think it's my
'cause
friend
your cost
Rebecca.
of the
She
t-shirt
said once
costs
upon a
you-
time
you
that
cost
after
your
9 o'clock
time,
at
like,
night,
you're worth way
she doesn't
more
do
than that, and
anything for
trying
her
to get
kids
that
or family.
into
That
some
is her
of
time.
artists'
So I
heads
try to
very
remember,
early on,
you
because
need time
it's a
to be
confidence
creative.
thing for sure.
Where are you fitting
Not
that
every
in
artist feels their worth. I'm like, no,
within
your
other
time is
priorities?
valuable to
But also,
you.
my kids are
Like, you have
almost
to
12
charge
now.
that value
And so
to
that
people.
little
And
hour
sometimes it's a tough
after
one
dinner
because
when
you
they're
don't know what
playing
people
video
are willing
games
to
and just having
spend, but you
fun,
also
I
have to
can
figure
run
that out as well.
downstairs. And that's one of the
And
lines
cold for an
between
hour.
being an
And
artist,
that's
freedom I have now that I
and
definitely did not have 10 years ago, being a creator who is running a business.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out not where that line is, but where your overlap is, so that you can still be creative and be an artist and sell lots of t-shirts. Or say, I hand paint t-shirts and it is art and they are $500 each.
Yeah.
And accept that and sell them that way. And both business models are completely valid.
Yeah.
You just have to figure out which one's the best for you.
Yeah, we've met a bleach artist that does so much cool stuff on textiles, and $300, $400, $500 for a single shirt, and like you're walking around with this beautiful art piece like that, like, and like the buyers are not going to be your everyday person looking at like, hey, I could go get a shirt from Old Navy for $20. It's not the same shirt. That's
But
the
again,
reality.
we still know people are going to pay $100 for pants.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Let's see. We've touched on quilting. We've touched on soap making. Now, I happen to know you're also a gardener. I know.
I just have too much energy for
But
doing everything.
Okay, well, you're preaching the choir, obviously, because we've talked about this multiple times, so are we.
I think you use a term eclectic maker.
Yes.
Which I think that's a great term.
Yes,
Yeah.
because, but also, so yes, I garden.
Mm-hmm.
I love gardening. But one thing I do just as a person and as a creative person is each year, at the beginning of the year, I don't do New Year's resolutions, but I say, what is something I want to learn this year? And I
love that.
spend the whole year just learning about it. And sometimes
awesome.
it's just reading. Sometimes it turns into an epic deep dive into that topic. But it's just knowing you always have to acquire new knowledge. You always have to have new inspiration. Yeah.
Well, so that was going to be my next question was, what else do you enjoy doing? What are your hobbies, interests, creative outlets? What are some of your favorites?
Well,
what are things that you've maybe tried and decided
I would
that's
say,
not for me?
what was the thing this year that you wanted to learn? Let's start that way.
Okay, so last year I did a deep dive into textiles, both history, but I was looking and interested in natural dyeing. So I ended up building multiple indigo vats in my backyard, inviting people over to dye stuff. But then I dyed some wool. So then I was like, oh, I need to figure out how to spin wool. And my sister couldn't hand spin. And so I tried that and then ended up finding a really cheap spinning wheel. So spinning wheel. And then I also on Facebook Marketplace found an old loom. So last year, like I literally dyed wool, spun it, turned it into a scarf by weaving.
I love that.
So this year, basket making, because I wanted to do more fiber arts.
Mm-hmm. And weaving.
It's weaving. It's kind of a different piece. I've definitely not done it as much as I did textiles last year. But still interesting to know different techniques and different processes, because you never know when it's going to end up in a quilt or in some other project.
Absolutely. And that's something we've also talked about before as well, is we have so many different interests, but sometimes you find that, like, even though they're completely unrelated, you might use a technique from, from this medium and apply it to this other medium, and it just totally, like,
it transforms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah, it's important, I think, as makers to not just get comfortable in your one craft and learn different things, although it might not be the thing you're selling or your main hobby or your main passion, but like learn those different techniques, because they can come in handy so much, like in ways you're unaware of them actually like coming into play. Photography, for me, I've been doing it since I think 99, but like the amount of times I've used the rule of thirds for like my art pieces and like learning those type of like compositions and then applying them to my graphic design side of things that I do and all that other stuff. It's like, oh, this all translates here. And then getting into like, oh, we're painting or miniatures and color theory and all these things, they all affect other parts of what you're creating. So I think it's super important. And I think it's so cool. Like every year you try something new.
Yeah.
Is there like idea of like implementing some of those things you're learning into like the business to expand the soap side of things? Like bringing like, okay, maybe I'm going to start hand weaving like
loofahs or something.
Yeah, or something like that. Is there thought process in like some of that? Or is it strictly like, hey, I just want to learn this technique and kind of let it sit on the back burner till like I come back around to it?
It's more the second. I want to learn it and let it sit. And I feel like most of the things I'm exploring lately have more creative application with art quilting. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I'm letting them percolate. Will
the art quilting side of things potentially get back into a business side of things? Or is that still just a personal, like, hey, it's for me and me only kind of thing?
I think it's for me. But I think that, again, when you're an artist and suddenly you've made 30 art quilts, you have to say, I've got 30 pieces of art. I should probably do something with them.
That's fair.
I should put them on shows. I should try to sell them, something like that. So I don't know. We'll see.
See how it goes.
Yeah.
See what happens. Yeah.
So has there been anything that you've learned or tried that you've just decided, nope, I'm frustrated. This is either too hard or I'm not interested anymore. Or, like you kind of like
it's not
left
what you
in the
thought
dust.
It was going to be kind
of. No, because I think that I always have some tiny interest in it anyway, and so that's enough for that quick spark to try something, just to see. And I mean, even if I only make 2 baskets,
right?
That's
did,
okay.
Yeah.
I did it. I learned something. There's a technique there that someday might end up somewhere else, and if not, I still had fun, and that's what it's more about.
Right.
Yeah, it really does come down to like, are you enjoying your time that you're putting into it? If not, then great, I'll move on to the next thing. But like, 2 baskets and you're, hey, cool, I did something. Like I made something
2 baskets.
Do you kind of already have an inkling of what the next year might hold with like trying to like what's your next little like side hobby? Or are you still kind of working on what you're like
or is it a secret?
We're 4 months out till the next year,
my
basically.
Gosh. No, do you have suggestions?
I'm don't even know what I'm doing. don't spin the question on me. No.
No. Yeah, right now I have no clue.
Yeah.
maybe something will present itself.
So
Oh yeah.
how do those things, how do you just saw it in a magazine and want to try it? Like, where does those inspirations for those things come from?
I don't know.
Okay.
They just
yeah.
pop in.
Saw a YouTube video and like, I want to try that.
No, just like, I think that I love old things and old practices.
Okay.
So I think lately especially, it has been an exploration of, my great-grandmother's way of life and what she would have done with things. So like my Little Red Hen project this year, last year, part of my garden was just squash bug central. It had been for 2 years. I was so mad. I'm like, I'm just going to let this plot lie dormant. But then I said, I wonder if there's something I could plant. So I'm like, I should try planting wheat. And I said, not only am I going to do it, I'm going to plant wheat. I'm going to grow it. I'm going to thresh it. I'm going to winnow it. I'm going to bake bread from it at the end. But I think that's just the idea of this old time of how would they have done it. And I think it comes back a lot to textiles. Like, looking at the history of textiles, it takes hundreds of hours to make a shirt.
Yep.
If you are starting from growing flax or growing cotton or, raising sheep for wool, just the hours involved in that. So it's just kind of having a perspective on the old art and how that could be reflected in what I do as an artist or a maker.
Yeah. I've been shooting film since '99, and I just recently got a medium format camera. So I think my next big thing that I'll be getting into is film developing, because I've never developed my own film. I've always sent it off to someone. Yeah. So if I had a suggestion, then it just came to me, like learning film process for that might be something.
Oh my gosh, I love it, because I've got this super cute old Holga from like the
fun.
60s or
Beautiful,
whatever.
yeah.
And I've shot a little bit of film on it, but nobody develops film anymore. I don't want to send it across the country.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that might because I was thinking about it. I was like, wait, hold on. I might have something that I can suggest. You threw me with the curveball of the question, but I was able to think one through. I think it's really awesome that you're trying to just kind of work with the old things that are out there and like learn them, because I think that is a lost art for some people. It's slowing down the pace, like understanding how valuable it is for a piece of textile where we were talking with our last guest, the trash pile, where there's large landfills of textiles that it's fast fashion, and we try to do what we can by finding vintage and like upcycling it and like bringing new life to things. And so I think that's really cool. What is that kind of like eco thing that you're trying to like create with like what you do? Like, how are you like bringing that old school stuff back to kind of help maybe lessen that impact on the environment?
Ooh, so I do a lot of mending. So I think that's one aspect that anybody can do.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a t-shirt, you can patch it and it will look cool.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to worry about it being something that your toddler did and somebody saying, why have you patched your jeans? You can just patch it these days and it's okay. So that's something that I try to look at, both in my own belongings, but it's hard, especially if you are making something and trying to sell it. How can you ethically do that, or as ethically as possible in what you buy for ingredients and how you package and so many questions like that.
Yeah.
Because it seems like the soap side of things would be fairly sustainable in terms of the ingredients. There's not a lot of waste, I would imagine, or byproduct from a home, soap business.
Correct. Like, even when I cut up a big block of soap, I have little tiny pieces, and I just sell those as samples so that I am trying to use them all. There are ethical considerations with a lot of the oils and butters I buy, because one of the ingredients I use is palm oil. And so I get it from an organic supplier in South America so that I'm not contributing to deforestation in Asia.
Awesome.
But that's just a little thing, but it's still, it is difficult to be able to source that and figure all of that out and how you can make something without having a huge impact. And then I'm buying it from South America. So it's obviously being shipped and
Right. So then there's fossil fuels and yeah.
But it is, like we talked about it in the last episode, it is that little thing that does go miles in the long run to start shifting everyone's thought process. And like, hey, like the biggest thing for us, like I think it's great that like we can go to shows like Craft Lake City and support local, and we love supporting all these artists. I know Christy picked up a bunch of stuff from the kids.
Oh my gosh, Kid Row is my favorite every year.
Oh.
They're so cute and they're so proud of their stuff.
And they're so creative and
They
talented.
are.
But I think
yeah.
it's huge because that kind of like next step for the next generation, and like just trying to, again, small little bit goes miles for all these things, because there are kids these days that were like that are aware of stuff I wasn't aware of when I was a kid, like that, and that's the reality. So I think it's great that we are, as artists, as makers, like responsible
And business owners.
and business owners responsibly trying to make those next steps. And like you say, I know you think it's small, but I'm it's a big impact that we all are trying to make that effort, and it goes a long ways.
I agree. It's hard to criticize a big corporation for not doing the responsible thing if I, in my own small business, do not do the responsible thing.
So, speaking of kids and Kid Row, you also have children. You have a family. You're working a full-time job and doing this business on the side. So how do you manage your time? How do you juggle all of this as someone who's about to become a parent and wants to continue making full-time?
I'll be honest, I don't watch TV.
Okay, got it.
So I feel like strategically there's a lot of little hour bursts of free time that I choose to have as creative time.
Right.
But I think that that's been modeled to me by a lot of other people. Like, I think it's my friend Rebecca. She said once upon a time that after 9 o'clock at night, she doesn't do anything for her kids or her family. That is her time.
Okay.
So I try to remember, you need time to be creative. Where are you fitting that in within other priorities? But also, I mean, my kids are almost 12 now.
Yeah.
And so that little hour after dinner when they're playing video games and just having fun, I can run downstairs and quilt for an hour. And that's freedom I have now that I definitely did not have 10 years ago. Yeah, but it's also making the time and figuring out what is my biggest priority. And for me, creativity is definitely one of the biggest priorities over TV.
Yeah. So just being very intentional with your time.
That's the secret. Be intentional. What do I want today? Where am I going to make that happen?
Do your kids have the aspiration to be creative and like maybe run the family soap business
Yes.
after you retire?
I mean, I will say they've been on Kids Row twice.
Oh, very
Yes,
cool.
so they have not done it the past 2 years, but they did it 2 years. They've taken a break, but they love helping out with my business. They want to box up soap and label soap, and they want to know my break-even point for different shows. So it's really sweet, but they're very proud of my business and it being also a family business to them. So
Yeah,
they
that's
call
very cool.
themselves my assistant managers, which is very sweet.
That is.
But I mean, they're both creative, so I think that cultivating that in myself helps me cultivate it in them and understand more the creative process.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What are the hopes and dreams of like potentially like their creative path for you?
Oh, I don't know that they have hopes and dreams. I think that they're just proud of my business and hope that it continues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, so their hope is probably just continued success.
I think one of the things I want to, because we talk to everybody who's been at shows with us. We've met everybody, like we've met everybody who's been on the podcast with us at other craft shows, art shows and stuff. People who are watching this potentially are on that edge of like, hey, I want to do this. Maybe I want to do it. I'm too scared and stuff. What is your piece of advice for them in that aspect of like maybe getting themselves out there?
Oh, just do it. I mean, really, life is such a short, phenomenal joy. If you want to try something, you only get so many chances. Nobody wants to live with regret, even with it when it's a little thing like, oh, I should have made that art. Oh, I should have started that business. I mean, I think that especially these days, we have 100 opportunities to reinvent ourselves and try again. So yeah, I'd say try everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like you are on that path of trying everything
Trying
every year,
everything.
and I think that's great. We are on the same vein, like looking at different ways of making stuff, looking at different materials, trying new techniques, and learning and constantly learning. I think that is, as a maker, I think that is a constant pursuit. It is, if you aren't learning, you're not making.
Mm-hmm. And you're not moving forward in your craft or your art. You just got to keep doing, keep trying, keep experimenting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think this has been a great conversation
Yes.
about everything soap and all your eclectic making.
Was there anything
have.
that you didn't get the chance to talk about that you wanted to?
I think that I have a question for y'all as well,
Okay.
and that is, how do you approach the overlap of art and craftsmanship in what you do?
That's an interesting question because I don't know that I even consider myself an artist most days. I don't think of it as art just because it feels very like craftish or hobbyish or I don't know. I've only recently started considering myself an artist in the sense that I am creating and designing and coming up with original things, really. So I don't know how I feel about that. I think I'm still getting used to the idea of being an artist or using that label at least. I definitely would say maker for sure. I've always been creative and I've always loved creating, but yeah. What about you?
I don't see a line between them. I think craftsmen are artists and artists are craftsmen in that sense. And pursuing the craft is an art form in itself. I know it might sound cheesy or like a non-answer, but I've always felt the stuff that I do is in some way it's an art form to somebody. And so like whether it's a basic small sticker or it's a mural painting or it's woodwork or whatever I put my hands on, it's still my artist touch in every single thing I do. So, and then it's still the craftsman building that side of things. So the craftsmanship of it, I don't know if the lines are blurred for those two things for me, because I think all in all they're kind of one in the same.
No, that's cool. That's a nice perspective.
You can't see it, but the dog just came in and wanted to
said
try and
hello.
make friends again.
I think he's ready for his dinner.
I
That's
think so.
probably why he's down here itching on us. But for everybody watching the show and wants to learn more about what you're doing, where can they find more information about your soap and everything you do?
Yeah, I'd say if soap, you can find me. My website's charmedmountain.com. Instagram is charmedmountain. And then, gosh, if you're just geeky and curious about art quilts, I'm really just on Instagram, Sara Victorious.
And we'll have those in the description of the YouTube video and all the podcast venues as well.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure we get those links in there.
Yeah, so thank you, Sarah, for being on the show with us,
Thanks.
especially after this long weekend with Craft Lake
Oh my gosh,
City.
it's been a super fun chat. Thank you
So,
very much.
Yeah, thanks again. So, guys, I appreciate you guys all joining us on our 5th episode of Always Making. If you guys are enjoying what you guys are hearing, watching, listening, however you guys are consuming this, please like, subscribe, comment about your hobbies that you're doing. We just want to talk to more passionate makers, creators, small business owners, and we'll see you guys on the next show.